The message arrived on a Tuesday, and I read it 3 times before I let myself feel anything about it. Martha, I know I don't have the right to ask. I know what the last few years have looked like from where you're standing. I've been doing a lot of work, real work, not the kind I used to call work, and I'm not asking you to forgive me or forget anything. I just want to see you. There's a place I rented in the mountains outside Asheville for the weekend. Helena is coming. I thought maybe we could just be in the same room together without it becoming what it always becomes. No agenda, I promise you that. Mom. The syntax was careful. The self-awareness was new, or performed well enough to read as new. I was 30 years old, a senior paralegal at Holt & Briggs with 11 years of document review behind me, and I had learned, professionally and personally, that the most dangerous contracts are the ones that feel like gifts. I knew this. I read the message a 4th time and called her back. The drive up took 40 minutes. The rental sat at the end of a gravel road in the Blue Ridge foothills, a cedar-sided cabin with a deep porch and a view of the ridge that turned amber in the late afternoon light. My mother was standing on that porch when I pulled in, wearing a cream linen shirt I didn't recognize, and she looked smaller than I remembered. She waved, and it was the wave of someone who had practiced looking easy. We ate dinner on the porch. She had made the pasta myself, and Helena used to request as children, and she'd remembered to leave the anchovies out of my portion. That was the kind of detail that lodged in me against my will, the small, accurate knowledge that mothers carry even after everything else has gone wrong. Helena arrived late, quieter than I expected, and she sat at the far end of the table and mostly moved food around her plate. I told myself that was just Helena. I'd been telling myself that for years. The tea came after dinner. My mother had made a whole ritual of it, loose leaf in a ceramic pot, the kind of thing she'd picked up from whatever wellness phase was currently organizing her identity. She poured 3 cups and set mine in front of me with both hands and a look that I now understand was not warmth, but calculation wearing warmth's face. The taste was herbal and faintly sweet, and I noticed nothing wrong with it because there was nothing to notice, not at first. I finished half the cup. I remember looking at the ridge and thinking that the light was doing something specific to the tree line, a particular quality of blue going gray, and that I should remember to describe it to someone, though I couldn't think who. Then the table felt far away. Then my hands felt borrowed. The last coherent thought I had was that I had read the message 4 times and still gotten it wrong. I came back to myself in increments. The room was dim, a single bulb in a wire cage mounted to a raw ceiling, the smell of sawdust and something chemical underneath. My wrists were zip-tied to the arms of a wooden chair. My ankles were free. There was a document on my lap. I did not panic. I want to be clear about this, not because it reflects well on me, but because it is accurate. Panic would have been a waste of what I had, and what I had was a specific set of skills and approximately no emotional margin. I looked at the document. It was a surrogacy contract. 12 pages, formatted well, the kind of template you could buy from a legal document service with a few modifications layered on top by someone who understood contracts at the surface level without understanding how they were constructed or how they could fail. There was a signature block at the bottom. My name was printed there in a clean serif font. Below it, a date. I read all 12 pages. By the time I finished, my mother had come in. She had changed clothes. She was wearing something darker now, and the linen ease of the dinner was completely gone. She was trying to look like a woman in command of something, and she was almost pulling it off. "I need you to sign that," she said. "Who are the buyers?" "That's not relevant, too." "Haley." I used her first name deliberately, watched her register it. "I've been doing surrogacy litigation support for 3 years. This contract has 6 unenforceable clauses, 2 that expose the arranging party to federal trafficking statutes, and a payment structure that will trigger a currency transaction report the moment any single disbursement clears $10,000. I held the document up. "If you've already been paid a deposit, and I think you have, you need to understand what your exposure looks like right now." She was quiet for a moment that was almost interesting to watch. "You can't know that. The payment structure is on page 9. Installment disbursements of $9,800. That's textbook structuring, Haley. Do you know what structuring is? It's what people do when they think they're being clever about the CTR threshold. The IRS has a separate reporting mechanism for exactly this pattern. The Bank Secrecy Act. Your transactions are already flagged. The only question is whether you've spent any of it. Because if you have, that's dissipation of proceeds, and the civil forfeiture exposure goes from the deposit to your entire accessible asset base. I watched her face run through several calculations. The one that landed was fear, and under the fear was something else. The look of a person who has made a series of choices that each seemed manageable in isolation and has just been shown the accumulated shape of them. You're lying. I process financial disclosures for a federal litigation practice. I'm giving you a courtesy. Sign the CTR yourself now, before the buyer's bank does it for you, and cooperate. And there's a version of this where you see daylight in under 5 years. I did not believe she would cooperate. I was building towards something else. But greed and fear operate on the same hinge, and I needed her to stay in the room long enough to start bargaining instead of escalating. It worked. She left without answering, and I heard her voice outside, low and urgent, talking to someone on a phone. Helena came in while she was gone. She stood in the doorway for a moment before she came all the way in. She looked tired in a way that went past sleeplessness, the kind of tired that has been metabolized into a person's posture and tempo until it is just who they are. She was 27. She looked 40. She lifted her shirt without saying anything. The scar was long and horizontal, low on her abdomen, the particular silver pink of tissue that healed years ago. She pulled the shirt back down. 2 years ago, she said, I didn't get a contract. I didn't get a lawyer to read the terms. I didn't say anything. You always got out, she said. College, then the job, then the apartment. You were always already somewhere else when things got bad here, and I was just here. I know. Don't, her voice was flat. Don't tell me you know. You don't get to know. You just get to sit there in your chair and be smart about it while I'm the one who already, she stopped, looked at the floor. She told me the money would help us both, that you'd understand when you saw how it worked, that you'd have come around eventually anyway. There was nothing generous I could give her that wouldn't be a lie, and she had been given enough of those. I said, I'm not going to tell anyone what you just showed me. That's not why I showed you. I know. She looked at me for another moment, and whatever she was looking for she didn't find or didn't need, and then she left. I heard the door of the main cabin open and close. The laptop was on a workbench along the far wall. I'd seen it when I was first taking in the room. My hands were bound to the arms of a chair that was, ultimately, just a chair. I spent approximately 4 minutes working the left zip tie against the rough edge of the wood until it snapped, and another 90 seconds on the right. I crossed the room. The laptop was unlocked. My mother had been logged into a cloud account, hers, as it turned out, organized with the baffling thoroughness of a woman who kept meticulous records of things she should have burned. There was a folder titled Arrangement Documents that contained, among other things, executed fee agreements with 2 prior names I didn't recognize, a chain of emails with a couple identified only by initials, and then, a few emails deeper, by their full names and a business address in Charlotte, scanned copies of 2 previous contracts, and wire transfer confirmations. I navigated to the Holt and Briggs secure portal. The login took a moment. I knew my credentials from memory, as I knew everything I used daily. The emergency protocol had been implemented 2 years ago after a paralegal in our Houston affiliate was assaulted during a client home visit. It lived in the file archive interface as a checkbox you'd only know to look for if you'd read the full staff operations manual. Archive failure code 99. It triggered a location ping to the firm's security coordinator, and, if not canceled within 15 minutes, an automatic escalation to law enforcement with the last known GPS coordinates of the accessing device. I checked the box. I did not cancel it. Then I opened the document upload interface and spent the next 8 minutes methodically uploading the contents of my mother's arrangement documents folder, tagging each file with the case reference system I used for every piece of evidence I'd ever processed. Date, source, document type, relevance notation. 11 years of practice. My hands were completely steady. I was back in the chair, wrists loosely resting on the arms, when my mother returned with the buyers. They were a couple in their mid-40s, well-dressed in the specific way of people who have learned that looking expensive is a form of credibility. The woman had the clipped efficiency of someone used to managing complex logistics. The man stood slightly behind her, which told me who was running the negotiation. They both looked at me the way you look at a piece of equipment you've paid for and are assessing for functionality. "She's awake," the woman said. "She's been awake," my mother said. There was something strained in her voice now. "There's a problem with the contract," I said. "The payment structure exposes everyone in this room to federal structuring charges. I can fix it. I've been doing this kind of remediation for a firm that handles financial crime defense. I know exactly how to restructure the disbursements so they're clean." I looked at the woman directly. "But I need the laptop to draft the amendment, and I need both of you to review it. That's standard. You wouldn't sign something you hadn't read." The woman looked at my mother. "She's a paralegal," my mother said. "She actually does know this." What I had given them was a story that fit the shape of their self-image. They were not criminals. They were people solving a problem through unconventional means, and they had hired a professional to manage the arrangement, and now that professional's professional daughter was offering a service. The story was coherent. It was also exactly what my mother would have done in my position, and they knew her well enough to find it legible. The woman said, "Fine." I pulled the laptop from the workbench and spent 12 minutes performing the most detailed, technically accurate, and entirely fictional legal document review of my career. I cited statutes. I noted line-item concerns. I asked clarifying questions that required complete answers. I kept them in the room. At the 11-minute mark, I heard gravel on the road outside. At the 13-minute mark, I heard 2 car doors. At the 14-minute mark, there were boots on the wooden steps of the cabin porch, and then voices, and my mother's voice rising over them, and then the door of the outbuilding opened, and there were 4 people standing in it who were not part of the original arrangement. "Agents Perez and Marsh, FBI." The woman in front held up her credentials. Her eyes moved around the room in a practiced sweep. "Nobody move." My mother looked at me. I said, "I uploaded the documents from your cloud account about 20 minutes ago. The wire transfers are time-stamped. The prior contracts are in there. I tagged everything." She didn't say anything. The look on her face was not rage, exactly. It was the look of a person arriving, very late, at the understanding that she had miscalculated the one variable she thought she had secured. Her failure was one of imagination. She had never been able to picture me as something other than her daughter. She had never thought to account for what I was at work. The agents moved efficiently. The buyers were separated and walked out first, the woman's composure fracturing visibly when she realized the agents already knew her name. My mother was last. She looked back at me from the doorway, and I did not look away. And then she was outside, and there were voices and radio static and the particular quality of night air that comes through an open door in October in the mountains, cold and pine-sharp and very clean. I gave my statement at the Buncombe County field office and was home by 2 in the morning. The firm's security coordinator had called twice. I called her back, and she walked me through what happened after the protocol triggered, professionally and without drama, which was what I needed. In the weeks that followed, I learned the following things in roughly this order: that the buyers were charged with conspiracy to commit human trafficking, and that both had retained separate counsel. That my mother had been charged with 6 counts, including the prior arrangements documented in the uploaded files. That Helena, who had been present at 2 of the prior arrangements as a courier but not a principal, had been offered a cooperation agreement. That the cooperation agreement would require her to testify. I did not call Helena. I thought about calling Helena. I thought about what she had shown me and what she had said, and the particular arithmetic of being the one who stayed when someone else left. And I thought that there was no version of a phone call I could make that would not be, at its core, another form of me arriving from somewhere else with a thing I thought she needed. So I didn't. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building on Lexington Avenue, a 1-bedroom with west-facing windows, and a problem with the radiator that made a sound every evening at 7 that I had made my peace with. I came home and I stood in the kitchen for a while without turning on the light, and then I went to my phone and I deleted my mother's contact. Not the messages, just the contact, which meant her name would not populate when I searched, which meant the next step would require effort I was not prepared to take on anyone else's behalf. I did the same for Helena. Then I stood at the window and watched the lights of Lexington Avenue and the ridge beyond it, dark against a darker sky, and I felt the particular quality of a room in which nothing is required of you. Not grief, not forgiveness, not even relief. That was enough. For that night, it was exactly enough.